Guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day today. Today we are back with another speed build. We are going to be building a greenhouse today, and I have somewhat built a greenhouse previously. If you watch my Sims 4 series, the current house, my dream house, has a mini greenhouse for Neville because he enjoys gardening, and I really loved doing that greenhouse. This greenhouse is very similar. It is also based off of the greenhouse in Hogwarts Legacy, but it is on a bigger scale than the previous greenhouse that I've built. And as the previous one has been on private property, a part of a house, this is going to be more of a garden center community lot. So Sims will be able to come here to buy a few items. There will be some seed packets for sale, some fertilizer. You can buy a bunch of different objects, decoration objects, or planter pots, or normal plants. Anything like that will be for purchase, but your sim can also go around and harvest the different types of plants, and the quality of the plants are pretty good. The way I got most of them is that I actually created a sim from scratch. Her name was Jasmine Holiday. She was based off of the Jasmine Holiday that would come during the gardening challenges, and I actually played her for a while. I built up her garden to, I believe it was excellent quality, and I saved the plants and I imported them. So there's not every single plant that's in the game in the garden center right now. I would love to add to it at some stage, but because I am playing through it separately in my free time just to kind of relax and do a mini challenge, I don't have everything right now, but in the future I'm planning on having it, and I really love the way this build turned out. As you can see, the main focus of this build is the giant tree, and this is the same tree in Willow Creek where you can actually water it, talk to it, and you go to a different dimension. And I really love the idea of this, mostly because this is based off of Hogwarts Legacy, and it is just such a magical place, and so I really loved having the magical tree here. It's also nice having a different community place to go and visit the tree and not just a lot in Willow Creek, seeing as all of the lots there are residential. If I'm not visiting anyone, I don't really have a reason to go there, whereas this is a little bit different. So I really love that the tree is there. Gotta admit, no cooking clue if it works. I haven't player tested it just because I haven't been to the world or the hidden lot in a long time, and I don't want to spoil it for myself. So I haven't been there in a while, but if it doesn't work, you can probably just move some of the rocks. The type of stone that we are going to be putting in this build, and it's not just by the front, it's going to be throughout the entire build, is kind of the stone. But something I really love about the stone is that there are two variations. So you get the clear stone, and then you also get the cracked stone. So something that I love to do to kind of give a little bit of a unique touch is that I'll put the normal stone down and then just randomly put some of the cracked stone around the place. That's something I find looks really nice in a lot of buildings, so it's not completely cracked and destroyed, but it's not perfect either, so it kind of looks worn in. I will do that in other parts of the build too when we get to it, but right now we are working on this water feature. I don't really know what to call it. I'm going to be covering some of the sides with some rocks and also be adding some of the fountain parts so that the water kind of flows into it. This was a very tricky thing to do because it's inside of a building, and for that reason I couldn't use any of the terrain manipulation because you can't manipulate terrain if you're in a building. So I had to kind of make a mini pond, but because it was different layers, every time I would do something else the water would disappear. So right at the end of the build I kind of add the water back in, and because I don't build or buy anything after that, the water does stay, but you will see throughout the build that this part is just completely empty. There's no water in it. We do fix it at the end, but it was just kind of something tricky that I had to work with. There is a lot of this part that I cut out and that you didn't see me struggle through because you're kind of just seeing the end part that actually worked for me. Over here we are adding a bit to the side of it. It's just going to be very basic. We're just going to add in some plants to it. I will admit, the inside of this build, I think, in my opinion, and I might be a bit biased, but I think it looks pretty good from the inside. The outside, not so much. It's quite horrific from the outside, so it's a little bit of an eyesore, not gonna lie. But as long as the inside looks good, I'm okay with that, because the only time I'm gonna look at the outside is from the map view, which, you know, it's not much of a looker, but on the inside it works really well. I am just working a bit with the structure. I wanted to get the main part in, and like I said before, that is the tree, but we are going to kind of have different rooms and different sections that has different types of plants that you can go and look at, kind of similar to in Hogwarts Legacy. In the herbology classrooms, you get a bunch of different classrooms that look a little bit different, and so this is going to be based off of that quite a lot. Even in Hogwarts Legacy, I remember running around and I took a small video just so that I can get the look to match. It's not an exact replica, so it won't be exact right, but a lot of it is based off of Hogwarts Legacy. So because it's a greenhouse, there are going to be tons of windows everywhere, not just windows looking out like in a normal build, but also windows facing inside. So if you kind of want to walk in the passageways or look into one of the rooms, you're able to do that and see the different plants. We are also going to be working a little bit more on the structure. It's not perfect, I'll give you that, but because the tree is probably the main feature, we needed to get rid of the roof to make sure that it's properly indoors and that it's not clipping through anywhere. We are also going to be working on glass roofing. Later we are going to be working a little bit more on that, but it was very tricky to do these glass roofings, so what you see right now isn't necessarily what it's going to end up being. We do switch it around a little bit if I'm correct, but in the end I'm happy with it. Like I said, from the exterior it doesn't look too good, but it's okay. I'm mostly going to be looking on the inside of the shop, so that's what matters. We are going to be working on the first room over here, and we just did some details from the top so that you can kind of look down onto the bottom. On the inside of this room, it's quite a big room, but we managed to fill the space fairly well. Even though each room will contain the same things, I did want to make them unique in their own ways, so there will be a different layout for each room. Some will have raised platforms, just so everything would be a little bit different. I'm going to be adding some tables and be able to put the planter pots on top of the tables as well. Some will be on the floor, some will be on the tables, mostly because in Hogwarts Legacy these are kind of like the work stations, and so for that reason, also a little bit later, I'm going to be adding in some stools, so it's kind of like you can sit and garden. In a bunch of these rooms I also add the flower making benches, because it does look like a workstation, but also because it's kind of a greenhouse, I can imagine that there would be flower making stations either for you to use or to buy. I do think I set a lot of them for sale, and if not, you can easily do that as well. I don't just put in normal planter pots and plants that are already in the game, but I also put in some of the plants that are in build and buy, so I'm pretty sure I also set those for sale. I've done this a while ago, so I can't exactly remember what I've done, but you can also just buy house plants as well as harvest from the trees and bushes and everything. Going with the theme of it being a greenhouse, I try and put as many plants everywhere as possible, so you will just see me stack everything as much as I possibly can. I'm going to be adding in some growing ivy as well to a lot of the windows, because I didn't necessarily want to add curtains because I don't think greenhouses have curtains, but I did want to block out some of the sun and also just like add a little bit more to it. So I'm going to be adding some things growing onto the windows, which I think looks pretty good, and also to these builds I'm going to be adding some small features. So for example, I'm going to put in a sink and a hose pipe because I love doing that. In gardens, it kind of makes me feel like you can connect the hose pipe to the sink in order to get some water, so I love doing that in a lot of my builds, and I do that a lot in these builds as well, so that you can kind of water the plants while they sit there waiting to be purchased or harvested. Even though that's not an actual feature in The Sims, it's just kind of good to imagine and pretend that's what's happening. So in a little bit we are actually going to change the entrance to this build. I really did like the door the way it was, but I decided to put it on this horizontal slope, and we are going to be adding in an arch as well. It took me quite a while to figure out which color best suited, but I ended up going with something that I liked, and so I'm quite happy with that. I also debated putting a fountain outside just because I wanted to kind of mimic the game, but I didn't end up doing that in this build. I might go back and add it in afterwards just because it really bothers me that there's no fountain, but I'm okay with the way it turned out. Over here we are just adding some planter pots to the outside. We are also going to be putting in some plants there as well that you're able to purchase and harvest, and I'm trying to decorate it just so that it doesn't look too bare. I wanted it to just feel very lively and full of plants, because that's the whole theme of this build, so it would make more sense for me to do that. We are almost going to be done with this room. There's going to be a few more things that we are going to do to the outside, so I'm going to be adding in some columns just so it gives it more 3D texture. That's something I really love to do with columns on the outside. If it's not actually holding up a structure, you can always just add it to a wall because it kind of has that 3D texture, so that works really well here. We are going to be working on the second room, so you can kind of see me mimicking the door over there, similar to the previous one, and I am also adding in the windows just like the other build. So this room is going to be quite different. I made a real effort to kind of make them all a little bit different and interesting. So instead of the plants kind of being on the outside and then being on top of the table, I decided to instead put them on a raised platform. And I didn't player test it at the time, but since then I have player tested it, and if these planter pots in the middle have a plant inside of it, your sim can interact with it, your sim can harvest from it, so it really works well. I'm also just adding in some simple decorations, as you can see. So we have the sink, we have the hose pipe again, and of course just other plants as well, including the watering can. I'm not sure if I do it downstairs, but upstairs something that I do with the watering can is that I actually use the move objects cheat to make it floating, because in the wizarding world there's a lot of floating things, including floating watering cans, so that worked really well. I don't think we do that to any of the rooms downstairs, but we'll definitely do that to the room upstairs. Speaking of the upstairs, here we are working with the structure a little bit more. Again, it was very tricky to kind of figure out how I wanted to do this just to get everything to look really good, and I believe it was at this point I realized that the outside wasn't gonna look good. I was gonna do a few more details to try and make it look okay, but from the outside it wasn't gonna look pretty, and I really just gave up on that dream and just put in more effort on making the inside look a lot better. So you can kind of see me working on the top floor a little bit. It is very bare at the moment, but we are going to go back to those areas and just kind of add in details to make it look a little bit better. We also add in these spotlights because I feel like when you're growing things you have a lot of artificial lighting. I'm not sure, I'm not really a plant person but that's just something I would assume. To this build we are going to add in one more room, and that is going to be on the top floor. We don't put two rooms upstairs just because the other side has a stairway going to the top, so I decided to only add in one extra room. But first we are working on the horrific roofing. This was not going well. I tried so hard and it just, like I said, I gave up after a while. I tried to add things to make it look better, so I tried to do like a giant plant pot on top of the greenhouse, and it doesn't look better. I think it looks a little bit ridiculous, but I do end up keeping it, especially from map view. When you see this build from map view and you kind of just see that plant in the planter pot, it looks a little bit funny, but at the end of the day, if you don't like it and you want to download the build, you can just get rid of it. We are also working on the entrance briefly. I put in the dance floors on the roofs because it is glass, but it also has a nice light to it. So I just kind of do that downstairs. Here we are finally with the last room, and I am just kind of going around copying things from the other rooms, placing it into the final room so that there is some sort of similarity between the two, and we are working out on the structure. So between recording this build, I used cheats to go into the mode where you can find hidden objects. I think it is show hidden objects cheat. And so I managed to get some really nice things, especially because I own Jungle Adventure. So I managed to get some vines, which you can see. I also got some fertilizer, which you can't really use the eyedrop tool to copy for some reason. Some of the objects are weird like that, where some of them you can copy, others you have to keep looking for it, which is rather annoying. But I did kind of get everything I wanted. I also got those little vine vertical plants. I don't even know how to describe it, but I remember using those for the wedding build, and I really love them, and I still love them. So I used that in a couple of the corners. I also add in some bathtubs, and I am going to use the Move Objects cheat to kind of raise a bunch of lily pads as well as some flowers into the bath, so it kind of looks like the bath is filled with water and this is perhaps floating on top of it. It kind of pokes out a little bit, like I wasn't really expecting it to line up perfectly, but at the end of the day I really like that. That is a technique that I've always wanted to do. I've also placed down some of those blue mushrooms because they look magical, so I might as well do that. There is also some seating in this room with those little bench ottomans, just so you can take a seat and just admire the plants if that's something you want to do. We are going to be doing some final details, and you can see me kind of raising the watering can over the crops like I mentioned earlier. I don't know if I actually showed this, but I do go through in that final room and I put down some seed packets that you can buy. I also found magic jelly beans, or magic tree beans, I don't know what you call it. I think it was from a challenge a long time ago, and that challenge never came back. I don't actually know if the fertilizer that I placed down is usable. I haven't tested that yet, and seeing as it was from the show hidden objects cheat, I'm not too sure. I'm just going around doing some final touches. So as you can see, I am about to add in some lights to the build just to really light it up. For some reason that was just something I completely forgot about to add lights to this building, probably because it's not a house building, so I don't necessarily think about it, but also because I'm building in day, there's so many windows, I don't really notice any of the rooms being in complete darkness. So there's just a few things that we're doing. I'm also going to be adding in a little pond to the front of the build, and I added in some spawn areas, so there should be like dragonflies spawning in. I don't think I did the swans, but I'm not sure if I did that. It's basically just some sparkles and stuff just to look really good, and I added in a fishing sign. I don't know if you can actually fish there, but I added it in anyways, and we are just going around the outside adding in some details, so the classic leaves and rocks to everything. There's another purple tree outside. It looks cool. It looks like there's a magical entrance in there, but I've never used it, and I don't think I've ever seen anybody use that in any sort of gameplay. So I'm gonna play with that in live mode at some point and figure out if it is a type of tree that you can interact with or if it's just for visuals. I'm not sure, but I'm really open to exploring that. We are just going to be adding in some extra things. So this is what I was talking about in the kind of hallway spaces. So it's not a dedicated room. I'm just adding in some planter pots or some decoration flowers or anything like that, just so it doesn't look too bare, and so that you walk past and it feels very lively. And that's something that I really enjoy about this build. The only other greenhouse that I've properly built is in my dream home. It was a greenhouse for Neville, as I've mentioned, and this is kind of on a bigger scale of that. So this is a build I really enjoyed doing, especially because I do not have a green thumb. I've killed a cactus before, which I don't know how I managed to do that, but I have the opposite of a green thumb. So doing a build like this, I really enjoy doing, and I think it's a really nice addition for my Sims to kind of go and enjoy themselves and to garden and to kind of explore that side of the world. So over here we are getting into the screenshots, and there is a decent amount because there are so many spaces and so many parts of this that I wanted to capture, so you can kind of see all of the different places from the different angles, and I really like the way it looks in the screenshots. Like I said, I like the way it turned out, especially inside the build rather than the outside of the build, but I'm really proud of it in the end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so that you're notified every time I post a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys!